They say all good things must come to an end, and the next series of Salvage Hunters, which we shot last year and airs in the autumn, is my last.
For years, Drew Pritchard was the face of British salvage, the man who could spot hidden value where others saw junk. But in 2024, something changed. He didn't just downsize or pivot his business. He sold everything. Hundreds of treasured pieces, personal favorites, even items tied to royal history, all gone in a single, haunting auction. This wasn't about profit. It felt like surrender. Behind the hammer were scandals, a painful divorce, a public fall from grace, a closed shop, and a dream renovation that nearly broke him. So what really pushed Drew Pritchard to auction off his life's passion and walk away from the world that made him famous? Tonight, we uncover the untold story behind the sales, the silence, and the slow unraveling of the king of salvage. A great deal has changed for Drew Pritchard since Salvage Hunters first aired, but nothing drew more attention than his recent decision to step back from the show. For over a decade, Drew was its unmistakable face, appearing in more than 240 episodes and winning viewers over with his sharp eye, blunt honesty, and deep respect for the antique trade. When the series began in 2011, Drew openly described it as one of the biggest opportunities of his career. He saw the show as a chance not just to entertain, but to reveal what life in the antiques world was really like, the risks, the graft, and the reality behind every deal. That honesty became the foundation of the program's success. Each episode followed a straightforward but compelling formula. Drew crisscrossed the UK, searching through shops, fairs, warehouses, and grand country houses. What he bought, he restored and sold from his base in Conwy. Nothing was staged. Every purchase came from his own pocket, and every restoration reflected his real business decisions. Viewers weren't watching a performance. They were watching his working life. That authenticity was something Drew fiercely protected. His longtime collaborator, Alistair Dryburgh, later explained that filming involved hours of real work just to capture a few minutes of footage. The crew documented genuine negotiations, real risks, and real consequences. That commitment to truth, more than anything else, set the show apart. In the spring of 2024, Drew confirmed that the 20th series would be his last. It wasn't a sudden decision. After years of relentless travel and filming, the pace had begun to wear on him. Still, he spoke about leaving with calm and pride, believing the show had fulfilled its purpose and grown strong enough to continue without him. As the final episode of Drew's last season drew closer, viewers began to look back at just how much Salvage Hunters had accomplished. Few programs managed to stay so faithful to their original purpose for so long. Yet the series did exactly that, turning the world of antiques into something engaging even for people who had never set foot in a salvage yard or auction house. Drew had a rare gift. He didn't just sell old objects. He gave them stories, context, and a second chance at life. Although his exit marked a major shift, Drew was careful not to leave the show adrift. He made it clear that the series would continue with people he trusted deeply, longtime collaborators and friends like Alistair Dryburgh and Vicky Knott, along with a new face yet to be introduced. He encouraged viewers to keep an open mind and to offer the next generation of presenters the same patience and support he himself received when the show first began. Behind the professional success, however, Drew's personal life had been far more complicated. For more than 2 decades, he was married to Rebecca, a woman who stood beside him through the rise of his career. Their relationship began in the early 1990s, long before television fame entered the picture. Rebecca was working in the fashion world at the time, while Drew was still laying the foundations of his antiques business. Their lives intersected almost by chance when Rebecca visited Drew's shop. What started as a casual encounter quickly turned into something deeper. They discovered a shared fascination with restoration, design, and the idea that forgotten objects could be made beautiful again. That mutual passion grew into friendship and then into romance. Before long, they married and built a family together. To the outside world, they appeared to be the perfect partnership, blending business, creativity, and family life into a single shared vision. Together, they helped shape the life Drew would later bring to television. But while the cameras captured success and charm, cracks were already beginning to form behind the scenes. By 2017, Drew Pritchard's carefully balanced life began to unravel in a way few could have predicted. That year, details of his private world spilled into public view after reports emerged of a relationship with a woman named Amanda Thomas. The two reportedly met through Drew's son, and what began as casual, friendly conversations between parents slowly crossed into more personal territory. For a time, the situation went unnoticed. Amanda's husband, Janus Bryn Thomas, a well-known local businessman who ran a successful crane company in North Wales, initially sensed nothing out of the ordinary. But gradually, small details began to stand out. Drew's name appeared again and again on his wife's phone, calls, messages, repeated contact that felt impossible to ignore. When Janus finally confronted Amanda, she admitted the affair. Overcome with guilt and wanting to repair her marriage, Amanda chose to end the relationship. But the separation did not go quietly. After she cut ties, Drew sent her a text message that insulted her husband and mocked him. Amanda showed the message to Janus, and that single moment set off a chain of events that would soon dominate headlines. Days later, tensions boiled over at the Liverpool Arms, a well-known pub in Conwy. Janus confronted Drew there, and the encounter quickly turned physical. Witnesses stepped in to break it up, but not before punches were thrown. Because Drew was already a familiar television figure, the incident attracted immediate attention from local media and then national outlets. What might have remained a private dispute instead became public spectacle. Police were called, and Janus was later arrested and charged. While Drew was technically the victim in the altercation, the fallout still damaged his standing in the community. Reports soon followed that he had been placed on a temporary pub watch list, limiting his access to local venues while the situation was reviewed. Not long after, another disagreement, this time with an unnamed individual, was said to have resulted in a permanent ban from several pubs in the area. Yet the most painful consequences were still unfolding at home. At the time, Drew was still married to Rebecca Pritchard, his longtime partner in both life and business. They had spent years working side by side, building a family and a professional empire together. When news of the affair reached her, the trust that had sustained their relationship collapsed. Within months, Rebecca filed for divorce, bringing an end to their marriage and closing a chapter that had once seemed unbreakable. Despite their legal separation, Drew and Rebecca Pritchard made a conscious effort to keep things professional. For a time, they continued appearing together on Salvage Hunters, carefully separating their personal lives from their work. Rebecca concentrated on her design projects and antique sourcing, while Drew remained focused on running the business and fronting the show. That arrangement lasted until Rebecca chose to step away after the show's 18th season. She never publicly explained her decision, but the farewell video shared by Salvage Hunters hinted at a desire for new challenges and a wish to make room for the next generation within the series. When their divorce was finalized, attention quickly turned to the financial settlement, largely because of the value of the assets they had built together. Although the split was described as amicable, the court ruled that Rebecca should receive a share of their combined wealth, estimated at around $8 million. The division was structured to ensure fairness and allow both of them to move forward independently. One of the most notable assets involved was their family home, an 18th-century chapel in Conwy, North Wales, purchased by Drew in 1995. The property had become one of his most distinctive restoration projects, blending historic character with careful craftsmanship. When it was later listed for £795,000, it reflected not just its market value, but years of work and attention. Once owned by Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger, the chapel symbolized more than success. It represented Drew's passion for restoration and the life he and Rebecca had built together. While the financial aspects drew public interest, both Drew and Rebecca remained focused on their children. They made a deliberate effort to co-parent peacefully, agreeing that stability and emotional well-being mattered more than any dispute. Even so, the combined pressure of the divorce and its aftermath weighed heavily on Drew. Around the same time, a new and demanding project began to reshape his life once again. He purchased a historic Georgian townhouse in Bath for £1.5 million, drawn to its history and potential. Determined to restore it to its former glory, Drew soon found himself facing mounting costs. What began as a long-held dream soon became one of the most difficult projects Drew Pritchard had ever taken on. He started the restoration with confidence, setting aside £200,000 and believing it would cover the bulk of the work. But within months, that plan unraveled. Material prices surged, labor costs climbed, and inflation quickly pushed the project far beyond its original budget. Plumbing and electrical work alone swallowed more than £150,000, leaving little room to finish the rest of the house. Faced with mounting expenses, Drew was forced into painful decisions. To keep the renovation alive, he sold his antique warehouse and began letting go of personal pieces he had collected over more than 3 decades. These weren't just stock items. They were objects tied to memories, discoveries, and chapters of his career. Selling them was emotionally difficult, but it became the only way to raise the funds he needed. In total, around 600 antiques went under the hammer. Among them were rare and unusual items, including a fossilized Irish elk skull and a Steamboat Willie model he had once bought for £3,500 and later sold for £5,500. Some pieces performed well, but many failed to reach their reserve prices. When the auction ended, it became clear that even this drastic step wouldn't generate enough money to complete the restoration. As the weeks passed, the situation grew more urgent. Drew warned his builder that work would have to stop unless new funding appeared. He held out hope for a solution, but none came. With no realistic alternative, he made the difficult decision to pause the project. Rather than finish the entire house, he focused on completing just the top 2 floors, his bedroom, bathroom, and a few guest rooms, so he could at least move in. Large portions of the building were left unfinished. For Drew, this wasn't just a financial blow, it cut deeply on a personal level. He had built his reputation on rescuing old buildings and giving them new life, and stopping halfway went against everything he stood for. Still, he chose to see it as a pause rather than a defeat. Living in the completed section has given him time to regroup and plan his next steps while preserving the rest of the house for the future. For now, the Georgian townhouse in Bath remains partly restored, a place of beauty, strain, and unfinished ambition. The unfinished house in Bath wasn't the only obstacle Drew Pritchard had to face. Long before that project began to unravel, he had already poured years of energy into something else that defined his public image: his antiques shop in Conwy. A tireless worker by nature, Drew reached a major milestone in 2017 when he opened what would become one of the most famous antique stores in the UK. Unlike the small, quiet shops people typically associate with the trade, his was bold and expansive, a true landmark. Thanks to salvage hunters, visitors came from all over the world just to see it in person. The shop quickly became more than a business. It turned into a destination, breathing new life into Conwy and drawing tourists who wanted to step inside a place they had watched on television. Celebrities, interior designers, restaurateurs, and collectors passed through its doors, some to buy, others simply to be inspired. For years, the store thrived and became part of the town's identity, with locals crediting Drew for helping put Conwy on the map. That's why the announcement in May 2022 came as such a shock. Drew revealed he was closing the shop, offering little explanation beyond saying it was time to move on. For fans who had traveled long distances to visit the Emporium, the news felt like losing a piece of living history. For Conwy, it marked the end of an era. Although the building later reopened under new ownership as part of a restaurant group, many still remembered it for what it once represented. After closing the store, Drew shifted his business online, continuing to buy and sell antiques digitally. But for many followers, it wasn't the same. The physical space had been something special. That sense of history also extended to Drew's long friendship with John T. The two had known each other since childhood, growing up in North Wales and spending their days combing beaches for discarded oars and boat parts they could sell by the roadside. That shared curiosity became the foundation of their bond. Years later, long before Salvage Hunters existed, T was already working alongside Drew in the antiques trade. On the show, T became a fan favorite, hauling heavy pieces, cracking jokes, and balancing Drew's intensity with humor. So when he left the series, rumors of conflict spread. In reality, his departure was simple. His contract ended, and he chose not to renew it. Not long after, Drew made his own announcement, confirming he was stepping back from the show as well. While he hasn't ruled out television entirely, his focus has shifted. Today, Drew is concentrating on his restoration work, his Georgian townhouse in Bath, and his lifelong passion for antiques and cars. After 14 years on screen, he appears at peace, content with a legacy built on curiosity, craftsmanship, and the belief that old things still have stories worth saving.